We'll see now. Yeah. Afternoon, or it's meant to be morning, but afternoon. Thanks, Kyra. Yeah, so I'm going to chat to you a little bit about the Baviaanskloof Conservancy, but I thought to also just expand a bit on conservancies in general. I do feel that in the Eastern Cape specifically, it's really a forgotten tool in conservation. And I think with the stewardship stuff, protected areas, there's been a lot of focus on that and a drive for that, but conservancy is also a good tool. So I know the session was around NGOs, but in a sense, conservancies are also non-governmental organizations, and we've also gone as far as registering ours as a non-profit company. So I'll just run through a little bit about conservancies in general. So on a national level, there's quite a lot of interest in conservancies, more around the KZN areas. There's a national association of conservancies, and each province is meant to have its own conservancies. But what a conservancy actually is a landowners coming together and jointly managing natural resources. So why would you do that? Number of reasons. A lot of the time it's for joint funding. Some of the times it deals with some natural resource management challenge or some problem animals, or just trying to share or open up a space. If there's a lot of small farmers wanting to utilize a bigger area, they'll often drop boundaries and form a conservancy. And then who forms it? Well, I mean, the National Association talks about conservationally minded people, cooperative management, all of these sorts of things. But it's generally, trying to get a little bit more than the average sort of agricultural association to try and actually manage collectively or on a broader landscape other than the boundaries of your farm. So in the East, there we go. So in the Eastern Cape, of course, if you go on the website of the National Association, you'll see these, every province has got an association, but not for the Eastern Cape. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of the talk, and I'm a bit biased to the conservancies that are within the sort of off-take realm. So when we're talking off-take, it's in wildlife ranching or ECGMA, which I'm involved in, and so those conservancies are mainly looking at the use factor of natural resources, whether it be wildlife or other natural resources. There are a few conservancies in around the coastal areas, around municipal areas that are doing other things, but I'm a bit biased towards this, so I'm just sharing a bit of more experience on that. So how to establish a conservancy? For the legislation is very loose on conservancies, I think. And with the change in capacity in the department, it seems like a lot of that institutional knowledge has also been lost. So there are two policies around how to form and establish a conservancy. Effectively, it is under the DIET. But what I've found in practice is that a lot of our regional offices tend to just do it however they feel. So there seems to be differences for every regional office of how to deal and handle conservancies, which does generally, it's giving us a lot of headaches at the moment, because when we've got new people coming in, they don't know what mandates to follow. And often, I mean, some of the conservancies I deal with are 40, 50 years old. They predate some of this legislation. And so it provides a lot of challenges. We promised it would work. Can you just go back a bit? So yeah, in a nutshell, it's an association that you're forming. For an official association, you have a constitution, develop a management plan. There's guidelines for that. There's guidelines for the association. There's guidelines for the management plan, and how the mechanisms behind it are run as projects. So you do projects under your management plan, and all of that gets submitted to the DIET, and they are meant to sign off on it. We're still sitting with a draft management plan from 2013, but we're operating. So it really is a bit cumbersome at the moment, but and hence why we're trying to get the message out there, because it is still a valuable conservation tool. So just a bit of the case study then for the Baviaanskloof. So most of you know me as Living Lands, but I'm also the managing director of the Baviaanskloof Bavaria, which is a company. And the company was set up as an implementing agent to the association. So we're keeping it at arm's length. A lot of association members were a little bit worried about what sort of litigation there would be, and they weren't worried. They were worried about the finances a bit. So we kept it at arm's length for that reason. But they do form our directorate on the MPC's members group. So, Baviaanskloof Conservancy, the Heartland Conservancy, established in 2013. It's about 33,000 hectares in size, with 16 landowners. 14 of them are still active farmers. And I think that's the beauty of this, is that you've got commercial active farmers within the boundaries of this conservancy. We've also got 2 nature reserves, so about 8,000 hectares of nature reserve. But as Wenzel alluded to yesterday, bit of problems in the legislature gazetting them, and these guys are actually even considering maybe deproclaiming because of all the challenges that they'd have to face with nature reserves. So that's just where we're located. For those of you who don't know the Baviaanskloof, it sort of runs parallel with the N2, sort of parallel, but a bit more inland between Potensie and Willowmore. And if you don't, it's in the middle of nowhere. It's about an hour and a half from Willowmore or Uniondale, 3 hours from George or Oatsman. So there are few farmers in the boundary, private landowners that aren't part of the conservancy. Those are non-resident farmers or landowners. They don't actively farm anymore. They retired lawyers or doctors. But a couple of them have actually now, because they've seen the benefit on wanting to come on board. All the other farmers are the resident farmers. So just to give a bit of our elevation, very steep topography, a lot of challenges with that. Makes it a high energy area for rainfall, and floods are quite frequent. But our rainfall is pretty low. We're sitting around the 300 mil average, although I haven't seen that since 2015. 200 is a good year for us now. Vegetation types. So in this forum, we're famous for the thicket stuff, but there's actually quite a lot of fynbos, quite a lot of interesting fynbos species at the back as well. Kyra thankfully mentioned Magriet's book. That a lot of those species came out of those back little fynbos pockets. So just a bit of background. As I said, the Conservancy was formed in 2013. I was actually I met Living Lands at the Thicket Forum back in 2012, and they asked me to come and write up the management plan. So we did that in 2014. Got the management plan and the constitution developed, and it was at about the same time that that Common Land got involved in the area, which Bas will chat to you a bit about now, or shortly. And then I think what's interesting, and it's good to recognize, is that we got some very big projects very early on. So that Coca-Cola and the Jeff 5 project really put a lot of emphasis on the rehab work. I mean, there had been a lot of rehab work done by government in the area. Yapi was stomping around there doing ponds. And those projects helped to pick up where essentially NRM was going to leave it if they didn't get those private projects. So yeah, and then we registered as an MPC in 2020, just before COVID, but that didn't really affect us too much. We had some very good funders that were very aware and very accepting of the COVID situation. But yeah, so we put all the assets and all the team and staff under the MPC, and I'll chat about now. I think that's the spot where it doesn't work, eh? Can you go back a bit? So, yeah. The projects that we run, we've got quite a few projects under the Conservancy. Some of them are funded and they're a bit more fully fledged. Others are getting there. I'll just run through a couple now, see if I've got some time still. So next slide. Wildlife was the main sort of entry point into why the reason for setting up the Conservancy. The landowners there had massive problems with kudu on their pastures, and especially in dry times, you get up to like 200 kudu walking in on a lucerne or just camping down there. So we formed the Conservancy in order to manage it collectively and thereby obtain exemption permits to be able to hunt kudu at night, because that's when they're on the land, and also outside extend the hunting season. To do that, we get a census, and we have then a quota for each landowner that I divide up. So in the beginning, it was very stochastic, trying to figure out what the balance is. It's starting to get a lot better now. We put an effort to try and actually reduce numbers in the area. I know a lot of people were worried about that in the beginning, but we just had a very high population density for that area. And especially with all the rehab work, it was putting too much pressure on the landscape. So we took a lot of numbers off, and but now we're stabilizing a bit, yeah. Also managed to successfully introduce some mountain zebra into the area. Also, but had to get some CAEs involved and things like that. But they're doing well, they're breeding, and it's great to have that back in that area. Yeah. Next slide. So then, of course, we in this forum famous for the rehabilitation work. I'm not going to go into too much of that. But Yapi's ponds, we've gone, I think we almost reached, Yapi, almost 4,000 hectares now of this stuff. Next slide. Some spec planting as well. I know the carbon guys have been knocking on the door to try and see, can't we get that registered? It's still a bit tricky for us. It doesn't really make financial sense. We are working on it to see why, and everybody else seems to think it does. But I think our rainfall is very, very low, so we're not getting the survival, or we're not getting the sequestration rates like everyone else is. Just the area that we worked in, so a lot of other problems that we have is cactus removal or alien removal. We've done about 5,000 hectares of cactus spraying and follow-up and continuous follow-up. And then, yeah, as I said, almost 4,000 hectares now of erosion control work. So we've got a semi-skilled, I'd call them skilled guys. I mean, I can't dig ponds like those guys can. Mobile team, I can take them anywhere in the Eastern Cape to do work. We've got a truck, we've got assets, we've got all the equipment, and these guys, 2 weeks into the veld, we sourced in local labor if we're working outside of the kloof to get a big project done, or otherwise they're just doing maintenance and follow-up on the rest of our work. Next slide. A lot of, having to do a lot of upskilling, using of chainsaws, using of herbicides, all the first aid, health and safety, all those regs, got that covered. But yeah, it's quite a trick. And then I think where the landowners started seeing the benefit of a conservancy is that while we're running these rehab projects, and of course all the landowners love rehab work because they can't afford to pay for it themselves, and it is quite expensive. I mean, Johan's also seen the costs of ponds. If you can't do it with funded, you can't do it with your own money. But what we do is we use the profits or sort of the retained income from some of these projects to then do other work that's needed. And I think this is where that value of a conservancy comes. I know a couple of the other conservancies in the area use hunting as a revenue stream to plow back into maintaining their own resource or their own infrastructure, like public roads. We also do, our fire management has been lacking. We didn't have to do it really, because the whole catchment burnt down in 2016. And we only now started looking at saying, okay, let's not let that happen again. But we're still slow on that. And then feral animal control this moment is just taking out donkeys and dogs where you can. But we do some sterilization programs, not as effective as I'd like, but those still need to get some work on. Next slide. And then some smaller projects. We managed to get in our own sharing team. There's been a problem sourcing labor for sharing, and especially with the smaller farmers, the sharing teams often come very late in the season to them. So we've got our own machines, got our own trained staff, and also some Anatolian dogs. It helps for the leopard. It actually that sort of small little projects work well for the landowners. Yeah. So just on the business side of things, so what we've done is, as I said, I've set up an MPC to manage it as a company. I'm managing director, and I've got 2 other directors that I partner with. But the association forms our decision-making body, or not decision-making body, our directorate body. The members, they guide us what we need to be doing, but because we're in a company, we can make decisions quite quicker and yeah, really manage the finances a bit better. So our main revenue stream, just be aware, revenue is not profits. Some of these things don't make profit. Some of them have to be subsidized by others. We've started to look at incorporating others, things like diesel diesel sales in the area, equipment rental. We've got a couple of trucks that run Lucerne in and out. Those are small little things that help to just get away from the reliance on donor funding. So, sorry, I'm recovering from a bit of flu. So just some of our current challenges, of course, as I alluded to, is the ambiguous legislation, permitting issues. I think all our conservancies in the Eastern Cape are facing these challenges. And then our reliance on grant funding and the expensive rehab work. So we're hoping to start moving into incorporating animals into our rehab as well and seeing what that does. But of course, yeah, it's sensitive areas. Next slide. And then to just conclude, I think for me, the take-home message here for this forum is that we're sitting with quite a number of conservancies in the Eastern Cape. A lot of them are very old, and a lot of them, these are just the few that I work with in the thicket biome. So I know Buffalo Kloof was mentioned already in the Indalo group, guys, but they also effectively a conservancy. And a couple of the others are quite big conservancies, 100,000 hectares conservancies. And yeah, they expand quite a lot of vegetation types. So it's worth knowing that they exist, worth knowing that they do have then more like-minded landowners in that space, and definitely something can come from it. Thank you.